Incredible. It was really an incredible scene. When you see the huge number of law enforcement that were there, we saw at least 2 massive armored vehicles that were being taken away from that scene when we first joined you all live on the air about 40 minutes ago. They were just starting to leave after taking him back into custody. Can we show that video again? Can we re-rack that video of him in the car? At least that's who we think it is in the car. And now we're hearing from Brian Fair that he was alone in the house. So it's reasonable to assume that this is Derrick Groves in the back of this police cruiser. We heard from our reporters at the scene that he was taken out in handcuffs, that he walked away from the scene. And as Brian Fair just mentioned, no one was hurt in taking him back into custody. So a huge cooperative effort, both on the part of the U.S. Marshals and these multiple law enforcement agencies, both here in New Orleans and in Atlanta. And you can see, I'm curious to hear what he was shouting outside of the car.
There's got to be some audio somewhere. We'll get that, of course. When you talk about the collaborative efforts here, Katie, another really big part of that you heard Brian talk about is the community. Had it not been for tips through Crime Stoppers, would we be here today?
Yeah, absolutely.
He said thanks to those tips, this is one of the ones that panned out that helped lead officers and authorities to this home in Southwest Atlanta to finally get Derrick Groves back in custody.
Yes, and as he mentioned, and you mentioned, Mike, there are many people who have been affected by the crimes that Derrick Groves has been convicted of committing. He was in the Orleans Justice Center waiting for his sentencing, at which point he would be transferred to a Louisiana State Penitentiary. Now, all the other inmates who've been recaptured have been taken to Angola, to the Louisiana State Penitentiary. It's reasonable to assume that if he is brought back here to Louisiana, that is where he would be housed, instead of being brought back to the Orleans Justice Center until he awaits additional charges, one would assume.
Yeah, I would think so.
Escape charges and, all of those things that the other inmates have also faced. Now, there are going to be some questions for people in that community in Atlanta, here in New Orleans, whether or not there were people who assisted in his escape and assisted in keeping him on the run for the last 5 months. You would think that he would have had to have had help. So I know that they have not shown much mercy to the people who have been involved in doing just that with the other escapees. So as this investigation continues, you would think that those are all of the threads that they're going to continue to pull, and that there is a possibility, as we heard from Brian Fair, that there could be some more additional arrests as this investigation continues.
And of course, the news of this arrest reaching right into the district attorney's office here in Orleans Parish. And I'll read a little bit of a small little quote from the Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams. He says, quote, "We will pursue every available legal avenue to ensure that Derrick Groves answers for every crime he has committed and every consequence he has sought to avoid." Now, considering what's happened in over 5 months, that list of charges and the crimes, alleged crimes, is probably going to grow at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There is no doubt that he will be charged with additional crimes. DA Jason Williams is actually having a press conference, or he was scheduled to, at 2 o'clock this afternoon on something unrelated. I'm thinking that we will likely go to that news conference live unless something else is unfolding, to hear from the DA and from some other law enforcement agencies, because there were supposed to be additional agencies at that same news conference. So hopefully they can give us a little more insight into how this played out. But we did hear a lot of new detail from Brian Fair. He said that it's a house on Honeysuckle Street in Southwest Atlanta, that they had responded about 2 hours earlier, that they used gas in order to try and get Groves out of the house. They weren't even sure at first whether or not Groves was actually there, whether or not anyone was at the home, but they were following up on a tip that Crime Stoppers here, Greater New Orleans Crime Stoppers, received, and that led them to this house on Honeysuckle Street in Southwest Atlanta. After that 2-hour plus sort of standoff, I wouldn't necessarily call it, a true SWAT situation where someone was threatening someone and it was a standoff. I think they were waiting to go in to make sure that someone was in there and that everything was safe in order to try and get him. But where they found him was in a crawl space under the house as he was trying to hide from law enforcement officers once he realized that he had been found.
I mean, on the run for 5 months now, that's someone who doesn't want to be caught. So he's going to try to hide as best as he can. And we still don't know what connection he has to that actual house in Southwest Atlanta, whether he knows the occupant or the homeowner, or I don't know whether it was abandoned at this point.
I don't know. I mean, one of the escapees was at an Airbnb. So, it could be an Airbnb. We just don't know. That's one of the many things that I think think we're going to be asking questions about as we start to hear from more law enforcement officers and agencies that were involved in this capture. This is a big win for them, given that no one was injured. They took him into custody safely without incident. And so now we're going to have to wait and see both where he has been throughout that time. You know, they're going to try and question him. Whether or not he's going to speak with law enforcement is a question. It's obviously his right not to, especially without an attorney present. And I assume that will be the next step that's taken in this, that they will get him to a police station there in Atlanta and try and question him to see if there were people who actually did aid in his escape and aid in his ability to be on the lam for 5 months.
And we know that was the case for so many of the other inmates.
Yes.
I mean, we have seen so many people be arrested and charged in connection with this escape who were not inmates. They were just friends of, family of,
girlfriends of.
So I
Yes.
would greatly assume that that's going to be the case with Derrick Groves as well.
You would think so. I mean, to stay hidden for 5 months, to get across state lines, you would think that he would have had to have had help. But we don't know the answer to that yet. And I know that is a very active and ongoing investigation, just from hearing from my law enforcement sources. So still much more to come on that front in the days and weeks to come. But right now, we really are just focused on the fact that Derrick Groves was just taken into custody in Southwest Atlanta around 1 o'clock this afternoon. Law enforcement officers, Atlanta police, the U.S. Marshal Service there in Atlanta found him hiding in a crawl space in a house on Honeysuckle Street.
And we do have a reporter from Atlanta joining us now live to kind of talk about the scene. Hey there, how are you?
Hi, guys. Yeah, I want to take you right to the house because we are standing directly in front of the house that you can see SWAT broke the door down to. They broke the garage door down to. And this is where we are told Derrick Groves was hiding. That convicted murderer, it appears, seemed to have been existing in the garage space as well. You probably can't see it from around the tree, but we were pushed a little bit further back when they put up the crime scene tape. However, you can see a bed frame inside that garage, so it was clear somebody was living in that space as well. I spoke with some neighbors earlier off camera when we were seeing Derrick Groves getting taken away in the car, and they were telling us that they noticed people standing in front of the window, looking out the window. She said there was just some suspicious activity. I spoke with a little older woman across the street, and she told me that she had noticed every time she went out to go to her mail, somebody was staring at her from across the way, looking through the blinds and just watching her. So at this point, neighbors say there was some suspicious activity going on for at least a month. Again, we know Derrick Groves was on the run now for 6 months, but a very scary situation for these neighbors here as well. And like you said, he was taken into custody at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. About 2:30 is when we saw the Atlanta police vehicle drive away. SWAT wrapped up. There is still a bit of a presence here, but it is certainly not like it was earlier. We saw the SWAT truck going out that way. We saw Atlanta police vehicles going in a different direction as well. So at this point, he is taken into custody. They left the scene at about 2:30. We saw Derrick Groves outside of that cop car, and then inside that cop car, he was actually yelling things from the back of the Atlanta police vehicle. Couldn't hear exactly what he was trying to say, but he was yelling out to the news crews that were here on scene.
Yeah, Marissa, while we still got you, that was going to be my question. If you could make out any of the words that he was yelling from that cruiser, because we could see that he was yelling them.
No, we really couldn't hear. We were trying to film it. I'm going to go back and listen to that video because we have it on 3 different cameras here for our news station. So we are going to go back and try and isolate the audio and hear exactly what he said. But we could tell he was certainly trying to get the crew's attention because he was yelling out the left side of the vehicle as the crews were over there. And then as the car turned around and police were taking him off, we could see him move to the right side of the vehicle, started yelling again through the bars of those windows. So he has something to say. We're just not sure exactly what it was at this point.
Yeah, inquiring minds want to know what he had to say as he was on his way out. We did hear from U.S. Marshal Service here in New Orleans that he was not injured. No one was injured in this operation, which I think is something to be thankful for.
Yeah, certainly. And the neighbors that I spoke with tell me that this was going on since about 9 o'clock this morning. But to your point, nobody else was injured. Nobody was injured in this situation. They tell me it was really quiet. They actually didn't realize what was happening. But the one woman I spoke with said at about 9 o'clock, the officers were here. She didn't realize what was going on. And at 10:30, she tried to leave her home, the neighbor directly across the street from where this went down. And she says the officers immediately told her, get back in your home, get back inside, get into safety. And again, she did not realize that there was a fugitive living across the street from her until all of this came out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So it has to be such a disconcerting feeling to know that after this happened, that somebody was living next door who's an escapee from New Orleans and he has been convicted of murder.
Yeah, and she said she noticed him. As we know, he was on the run for about 5 months, but she says she noticed him really for the last month. Again, couldn't identify him, didn't know who it was, but said she did also notice cars going into the back of the house, never parking in the driveway. Another neighbor told me the same thing. He also never noticed any cars in the driveway, which is abnormal, especially when you notice people inside the home. So if you're seeing somebody, like she said, looking at you through the blinds of your windows, and then you're noticing that there are never any cars in the driveway, she just said she knew something was wrong. She didn't know what it was.
And Marissa, one of the questions we were talking about earlier is, was this home abandoned? Was someone living in it? We look behind you and you showed us the house. I mean, the lawn seems to be well kept. There's landscaping seems to be kept up as well. Did neighbors talk about who was living there or whether they knew their neighbors?
So one of the women that I spoke with, one of the neighbors that lived across the street, she said that the house was sold a few years ago. She does not believe the owners that have owned it for the past few years were living in the house. She believes it was a rental. She does not know who the renters are. She said that she had been in the home a few years ago, back when she knew the owners were staying here. But as of recent, she said it has been renters to her knowledge, and she doesn't know them. And I know the shot's going to be a little bit shaky, but if I can, I'm going to have my photographer Nicholas pick up the camera. If you guys will just bear with us. And I want to bring you over here because you really can see through the garage, and it's a better angle. So if Nicholas, I know I'm asking a lot here, but through the garage, you can see what I'm talking about. The bed frame is there on the left-hand side. You can see the door through the back of that garage. It looks like somebody was living in this space. And one of the neighbors also told me he heard it this morning when SWAT knocked down the door. You could hear it down the street, knock down that garage door that you're looking at, as well as the front door of the home that you saw earlier.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's also interesting to me that he's been living there for a month, that the neighbors have noticed him there for a month. And I'm curious to know who ended up giving Crime Stoppers that tip that ultimately landed law enforcement on his doorstep.
Right. We're not sure at this point. We're learning information as you guys are, so a lot coming out. We got sent to the scene at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and we were here for when they took him away in the police car. But a lot of the legwork on this morning we were not here for. I'm not even sure that all neighbors understood the severity of this. Most of them told us that they just realized it was the fugitive from from New Orleans here in Atlanta when we were talking to them within the last 30 minutes. So they were unaware of the scope of this at this point.
All right. Thank you so much for all that great information. That's Marissa Sarback with our sister station 11 Alive in Atlanta. And hopefully we'll talk to you again in a little bit as we all continue to try to get more information on this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Interesting information coming out of that report.
And just to see that house.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like a nice neighborhood. Hearing from witnesses that he was sort of peeking through the windows sometimes to see what was going on in the neighborhood.
Unless somebody else was in the house with him.
Yeah, and they noticed him for over a month now at that house.
They also may not have known who he was.
Right.
No, he was wanted in Orleans Parish out of Louisiana for escaping prison.
Yeah. But it's interesting if he's been in that same location for that amount of time and how much he's been moving around, from Atlanta to different parts of the country. Witnesses at the scene made it sound like law enforcement officers got there at around 9 o'clock this morning, that they were there for a couple of hours trying to get who they believed was Derrick Groves out of that house. It took some gas, being thrown into that house. Yes. And then obviously they broke down the garage door, broke down the front door, had to find him actually inside the house, and they found him in a crawl space. So I think he was hoping that law enforcement would break in, that they wouldn't find him, and that he would be able to once again get away. Obviously that didn't happen. And then something else interesting, Mike, is that we saw him screaming, and you heard Marissa there talking about how he was definitely trying to get himself heard as he was going away in that police car.
Right.
Moving from side to side, trying to get the camera's attention as they were driving away with him, but we just haven't been able to kind of slow it down and figure out exactly what he was saying at this point.
Marissa said she's going to go back and watch that video just to see if she can kind of get a clue in and hear what he was actually screaming from both sides of the police unit there. But of course, now we know that that is Derrick Groves, who has been caught there in Southwest Atlanta after 5 months. We're almost 5 months to the day.
Yeah, almost.
The 15th, 16th of May, whenever that happened, and here we are on the 8th. So we're almost to that point. So
almost there.
It's a big sigh of relief for everybody back here in Orleans Parish. Because we never knew where he was.
Right.